every flower on the planet affects us in different ways, emotionally, mentally, spiritually. And I thought, that's really cool. And then he said if we could get 3% of the world's population actively working with this type of remedy to create this momentous ripple effect, that would essentially change the future of the planet.
All right. So today we have Katie Hess, the founder of Lotus Wei Flower Essences, an amazing company that has just a plethora of products for healing and self-healing that I've been really impressed with, that has gone above and beyond any other flower essence company or even supplement company as far as what I've seen clinically. And so I've been so impressed, and y'all have reached out to me in a variety of ways through different people and practitioners who have told me about it. So the word of mouth is getting out there, which is great. I've had half a dozen different practitioners tell me, like, you have to check this out, which doesn't really happen with supplements. It's been like a decade. The last time I heard about anything that people were excited about was probably spore-based probiotics in the nerd kingdom. So it's pretty great. So to hype you up a little bit, but I'd like you to give, woohoo, people are excited. But I'd like to kind of get your story from you and ask you, like, who you are, what's your life story, how did you get into all of the things you're into now with Lotus Wei and healing?
Yeah, I mean, I grew up in the Midwest, in Minnesota, Wisconsin, Michigan. I moved around a lot as a kid. I loved being in my mom's garden. I loved walking around the woods by myself. Never really thought much about it. Although when I was 7 years old, I did have this crazy sensation where I just like wanted to find my tribe of people. At the time I was living in the middle of nowhere in Michigan. And I would try to like do astral projection every night before I went to bed so I could like basically find my people. I love that story because I'm like, I found you, like everyone around me. I'm like, I finally found you. And so I basically just had to like wait until I got older, get through school. I ended up living outside the country, wasn't sure what I wanted to do. And then I traveled through Asia. I lived in Mexico. I lived in Germany and Spain. And then everything happened when I met this expert from Spain who was teaching about flower essences. And he said two things actually to me that just got me on my way. The first was that every flower on the planet affects us in different ways, emotionally, mentally, spiritually. And I thought, that's really cool. And then he said if we could get 3% of the world's population actively working with this type of remedy to create this momentous ripple effect, that would essentially change the future of the planet. And I was like, I'm in. This is great. So I was like, I'll bring the flower essences back to the United States, and then came back and it was 2001 and it was like, oh dear. Like, yoga wasn't cool, meditation wasn't cool. It was like a bit of an uphill battle, but it was good because it afforded me, like, the first decade was seeing people one-on-one. That's all I did. I never expected to have products. And I really just like dove into like, what's the human psyche? What are we experiencing? What are we wanting more of in life? What's paining us? Where is our suffering points? And how can we alleviate that? And then I started collecting flowers. And then it was a whole other like, connecting people with flowers that could, alleviate their heart troubles. And then fast forward, the second decade was really just learning about how to be an entrepreneur. And I don't really have that in my genetics. So it was like, how do you run a team? How do you do accounting? And how do you make products? And how do you do social media? And how do you do events? And really, it's just been a process of like continual humbling of myself and really asking, like, how do I find the people that are really looking for what we have? And it's been really exciting over the last few years just to see people's minds change and become more open, and they're looking for things that are like natural, no side effects, that they can feel the benefits. So now we live in Phoenix, and I have about a 20-person team. and we're at the Self-Arising Nature Center in this huge 15,000 square foot building, and we have practitioners here, and it's like a wellness center. And we're opening a business in India. So we're really just like putting one foot in front of the other, and partnering with lots of practitioners like yourself to create a wave of positivity.
That's remarkable. So I'd like to kind of ask what your experiences were with the guy in Spain, or like, what was your first few times with flower essence? Did they work for you? Did they not work? Like, what was that like?
Yeah, I mean, I was so lucky that I was fluent in Spanish because he didn't speak any English. All my original notes, I've got notebooks and notebooks of notes and stuff. They're all in Spanish. Um, I just remember when I first started working with the essences, it was like I could suddenly see blind spots that I hadn't seen before. I remember working
Mm.
with one of the Bach remedies actually called impatience, and I had thought my whole life that I was such a peaceful, patient person. And I started taking this remedy, and I was like, no, I'm not. I'm like one of the most impatient people in the world. Like, I'm really impatient. And I thought that was so curious that it could point something out to me in a way that I hadn't seen. Like, you think you know yourself, and actually,
Yeah.
there's more,
Yeah. That's so funny because impatience is one of my first times with a flower essence where I actually noticed it working with a patient. I was like, it came up like I was muscle testing her, and it was coming up like some sort of frustration, etc. And I was muscle testing what to do. And normally I'll do like NET or acupuncture to clear it, but every so often like comes up to test for a specific homeopathic or a flower essence, and it came up as that remedy. And as I'm looking it up, like I scroll through like a numbered list of like 2,000 different remedies. It's like, okay, number 1,027, and it comes up impatience. And right as I'm reading it, she's like, I just feel so impatient. And I was like, oh, okay, well, I guess this is your remedy. And she took it. It like brought more awareness. She didn't realize she was impatient, but apparently she was. And it really helped change her relationships that she was struggling with. And it's so fascinating that I think sometimes you can do all the therapy in the world and you don't really gain the awareness. And I think one of my mentors said it's really easy to heal. It's like a spiritual teaching too, I think. Alan Watts might have even said this. It's really easy to be like a peaceful, calm, high vibe monk in a cave alone by yourself. It's a lot harder at Thanksgiving dinner with your family. And I think like our relationships are what actually teach us who we are and what we have to work on still. Like the more people we're around, the more we get subtly triggered or bothered, or we have reflections back of who we are, or what our weaknesses might still be. And as well as our beauty and our strength. But I think it's interesting that a flower could also reflect back to us what our essence is.
Absolutely. I mean, it's like showing us where our strength is, or like maybe where a hidden gem is, or something about ourselves that we don't even know. I mean, that's the thing I think that's been the most mind blowing about it is not just seeing your blind spots of so-called negative things or, challenging spots that we need to work on. Yeah, absolutely. But also they can show you things about yourself that you're amazing at that you didn't know. Like uncover hidden talents, or like help you get into spaces of being more bold or being able to spread your message or get up in public speak or blast through some kind of fear or limitation that you've had your whole life. And that's like where I get really excited because I think if everyone on the planet was more self-liberated, I mean, that would be an exciting world to live in, right?
It'd be pretty wild. Yeah, it'd be pretty wild for sure. I guess I'm thinking like liberated and in control of themselves. But that'd be really cool. I think that is a good point though. That like the flower essence can help you in terms of like who you want to become as well. Which a lot of people don't really realize. They sort of come into me as a practitioner with like, here's my problems, rather than coming in like, here's what I want to create for myself. And a lot of times they'll feel
Yeah,
emotion like anger or frustration. I'm like, well, what's the exact opposite of that? Maybe it's change, maybe it's peace, acceptance, forgiveness. And I think the flower essences are a beautiful way to continually remind them of what they're trying to create.
Yeah, and I think that's in some ways one of the ways we're different from other flower essences is like it really isn't about what's wrong with you or what needs to be fixed or like the next crisis, you know, it's about what's right with you and how do we amplify that? How do we magnify that? How do we like pull that out of you in a way that you don't even know is possible? And part of it I think has to do with what most people don't know about flower essences is that they are working on so many different energetic levels. So like my flower essence teacher would say, they are clearing from your cellular memory any patterns from up to 6 to 8 generations back in your family lineage. So the way your grandfather thought, the way your great-great-grandfather, grandmother thought, emotional patterns, like we chose to take birth in this family and now we've got all this stuff, which is awesome, good, bad, ugly, beautiful, right? But the idea is, how do we turn the volume down on the things that don't serve us from our lineage and then turn the volume up on our true nature? And then you see that there's 2 more layers. One is like, what have we learned from womb until now? Because nobody is seeing reality as it truly is, right? We've got all these like filters and the thing that happened to me when I was 5 and then when the kids on the playground did this and, you know, all those things. And then you have the 3rd level, which is like collective consciousness. And it's like stuff that's coming through the news or the ethers or the way your friend group sees something. So you have these 3 layers of basically like informational sources, you know, that you're tapping into. And so the question is, how can we use modalities like flower remedies to soften the ways that we see the world that actually aren't true, that aren't us, and then amplify what it is that really comes from inside, like our true nature.
Yeah.
And I mean, honestly, when you think about like, I mean, it's kind of mind blowing when you think about like, wait a minute, patterns from my family? And then everything I've learned since I was a kid? And then everything that's in the environment? Like, that's a lot to manage, right? That's a lot.
That is a whole lot. I know people, I was going to count on them, like people sort of go to the place of like, I got to fix not just my baggage, but like all the generations past. Like all those wars we went through, maybe like you're Jewish, maybe you're black, maybe you were a slave, maybe you were a woman, maybe you were, I don't know, anything. Maybe you were like on a ship and had trauma there. Like who knows? There's a lot of past trauma. There's also a lot of past strength to bring out too, which people don't always think about. They kind of focus on the negative because our brains are sort of designed to protect us from danger and problems. But it's fascinating. I think I really want to repeat what you said for people because I've learned through social media that repetition of the same things over and over again is like what people pick up on. But I think what you said that Lotus Wei does enhance the positivity more than other flower essences is very important. And I got to talk smack. I was a little bit upset about Bach flower remedies and how they've like changed their formulas over the last number of years and got bought out, which is a bummer. But I really was encouraged because like right as I was finding that out, I started finding out Lotus Wei existed, which is a great new powerhouse in that space. But I really like how it's not just negativity. It's like coming in like, what do you want to create for yourself? And also the power of looking at a flower and knowing it may or may not be good for you is a whole new concept. And I'm wondering if you could talk about where you got that from or the flower quizzes and things like that you've created.
Well, you'll always be drawn to what heals you and to what is going to amplify your strengths and the qualities, the special qualities that you have. So you might think it's arbitrary that you're walking in the forest and you're like, oh, check out this cool little flower here. And you want to move closer to it, but it's actually not arbitrary. It's your energy system. And, you know, it's like so much easier to think about it in terms of technology. It's like the, you know, gets closer to that particular botanical or floral Wi-Fi because there's something in you that wants to upgrade or download or whatever it is. And so you get closer to it so that energetically your system can pull in the message or the life force from that particular flower. Or like, let's say you go to buy flowers for your mom in the flower shop. You're thinking of your mom, you're walking around, there's a million different things, and it's like, ooh, these ones. It's because you can zero in on what your mom needs for like the best expression of who she is, and you're drawn to that, which is such a cool mind flip because we've grown up in a culture, especially in the West, that's like, you know, you need somebody outside of yourself to tell you in a white coat, preferably, what is right or wrong with you or what's happening, or you need a lab test or what have you, right? And all those things are good, but it's really quite empowering when you realize that actually you do know what you need, even if you don't know you. That literally you just naturally, you're that freaking intelligent as a human being that innately you just are drawn to the things that you need the most. And so if you look at, like we have these, you know, cards with flower photographs and you just pick the 3 you're most drawn to, and then we'll tell people what those flowers do. And inevitably, especially if it's the person's first time, it's like, oh my God. You know, you feel like your insides are out on the table because it's so right on. But we didn't select them. You did. So, and then like the quiz, you just choose what you're most drawn to in the moment. Feels very quick and arbitrary. And in the end, it's just that your intelligence is insanely efficient and you know what you need. That's cool, right?
That is very cool. Well, how do you know you're not drawn to like the Krispy Kreme donut at the grocery store? Or how do you know, it's like you're not in your inner child that's like, ooh, I want to just like irritate these wounds a little bit. Like, how do you know, like, oh, I need some strength and cleansing and courage today? No, but that is a really, really cool thing. I remember as a kid, I would always try to grow plants, and I always had like a Venus flytrap, and every year it would die, and every year I'd get another one, every year it would die, which means maybe it wasn't my divine timing, which is apparently what that's meant for. But it's nice that flowers only last so long, but the flower essences can kind of harness that energy for a longer period of time too.
Yeah, I'm not the best with plants either. I grew up with a mom who was green thumb, green fingers, everything green, and she can like pinch them and like, you know, abuse them, and they're just like, ah, yeah, and they grow. And I think I have more of a fiery makeup in my element, so I touch them and it's like I burn them or something. You know, maybe you have the same with
Yeah,
the healers or similar. Did you
probably.
know what the Did you know what the Venus flytrap is for though?
Well, I was looking at the Sacred Awareness bottle, which is sitting in front of me, and it said divine timing, but you want to expand upon that? Do you remember it off the top of your head?
Yeah, absolutely. It's like when we tend to want something and then we just go hard at it. Like we go hard, we overextend, we're just gonna like make it happen. And we end up using all of our energy stores. And by the time we get what we want, we're like, I don't know if I really want it. I'm too tired.
Yep, that's a good one for me for sure.
So it reroutes it so that, especially Midwesterners, like Midwesterners freaking work too hard, right?
Yeah.
It's like, how do you conserve? How do you
Mm-hmm.
hold, wait? Oh, you see the thing you want, boom, and you go after it.
Got it.
It's shifting that
Like
dynamic.
catching the
It's
fly,
conserving.
yeah, waiting for it to come to you, kind of, and then being like, "Oh, it's right here, got it," which is nice. Nice. Um, I have a theory too. Like I know the doshas and the Chinese medicine aspect to like who's more earthy or who's more fiery. But I think I have another theory that a lot of healers just either have so much empathy or highly sensitive people, or they're just like taking care of everybody else all the time. They just like can't take care of one more thing or the plant. I have a joke with my friends. It's like, I shouldn't have to give the plant energy. The plant should be giving me energy. Like, I'm taking care of everybody else. Like, shouldn't the plant take care of me? Like, which is what a flower essence really is in a way. It's like the plants taking care of us instead of us having to grow the plants, which is kind of nice.
Oh my God, and they do. Have you heard of the work of the CIA guy, Cleve Baxter?
No.
Oh my God, so you're going to geek out. This is a guy who he was in the CIA and his specialty was the polygraph, right? The lie detector machine.
Hmm.
And he's like super nerd guy and that's all he did. And he taught all the CIA guys how to use this machine to know whether the criminals were lying or not. So one night in his office, he got curious. He was like thinking, I wonder what would happen if I hooked this machine up to this office plant that he had. So he hooks it up And that just like starts a whole series of experiments and totally changes the way he sees the world, because he's got this machine hooked up to the plant, and then he thinks, oh, I wonder if I should like go get matches for my colleague and light a leaf on fire and see if it will register stress. And the moment he had that thought, right, he didn't have matches. He was just thinking about getting matches and thinking about lighting it on fire. The plant started to freak out and register all kinds of stress on the machine. So then he felt really guilty. He was like, oh my God, this thing is sentient. It can read my mind and my intention. It knows. And so then he started his whole, like, all cool, kind of cool experiments where he'd have a plant, it's hooked up to the machine, and he'd have several people walk through. Some would walk through the room and just walk through. And then there would be one of those people who would come and like crush up some of the leaves, like destructively, and then walk out, and then a few more walking. Then he had those same people just walk through the room, single file, like almost like a what is that when you're like trying to figure out the murderer on the line?
Witness. Yeah. Yep. Who's the suspect in the murder? Yeah.
So when the person walks in who is like crushing up aggressively the leaves, the polygraph machine starts to freak out and the plant is showing stress. So the plant can essentially identify the murderer in the room.
Whoa. That's wild. It's kind of like the dogs being able to identify cancer or see energy, or like the trees communicating to each other, which is a real phenomenon. They're just like, that's mind blowing.
And then if you have a house plant, like let's say you had a Venus flytrap still, they relate so deeply with you. Talk about being empaths. That this is another experiment he did. He hooked up his colleague's plant to the machine. The colleague drove like, I don't know, a few hundred miles home. It was his birthday. Somebody had planned a surprise party. He didn't know. And they looked at the clock, and the precise moment that his colleague got home and everybody jumped out of the curtains like, surprise! His office plant showed a level of empathic stress with him, even though he was hundreds of miles away.
Whoa. That's nuts.
Crazy.
Like I've heard research about dogs with that, where like they know the moment their owner is coming home, no matter where they are. Like as soon as they start returning home, the dogs start like waiting by the door. But I've never heard that from a plant. That is mind blowing. Yikes. That also reminds me of the experiment people do where they say really nice words to one plant and hateful words to another plant and watch the differences in how they grow. I really want to do that study soon. One of my patients did it last year and sent me the video, and they made 2 jars of rice. They like cooked rice, put it in 2 jars, and they spoke nice words to one. And really, this person is Orthodox Jewish, so they actually don't curse, but they said really mean, hateful words to the negative rice jar, and then bottled it up and left it. And the one that had the hateful words grew mold within a few days. In a week, it was like mostly black moldy. And the other one had 0 mold in it whatsoever. So like people think about like mold illness, yeast, which is basically like a death process. Like how interlinked like your words are with even yeast and mold and death and all of that. And, how plants will grow differently based on your energy, how you talk to it or not, is remarkable. I have a really interesting story I just remembered from Dr. Peter Van Huel, whose practice I took over. He's in Belgium now, but he had 2 cats, and one of them had terrible travel anxiety. Terrible, like would just freak out, couldn't go in the carrier, would scratch everybody, couldn't get it to the vet. They had to get like a vet friend to come to their house. And they finally were just like, we're going to try something for this. And they were trying different homeopathic remedies and flower essences. And they tried like every single flower essence they had. None of it worked. And they finally decided to go on a long trip to Belgium from America. And the wife admitted to the husband, like, you know what? She's like, I just don't really like traveling very much. Like I get a little anxious about it. And so he gave his wife a flower essence, and the cat calmed down. So it was the mom, his wife's travel anxiety, that was helped by the flower essence, and then the cat relaxed.
Crazy, right? Those pets, they like take on all our stuff.
Yeah. So I think like plants, pets, living beings, we're all more interconnected than we like to admit. And there's tons of research for it. You just have to sort of like look in the crevices. Like if you want to be in the cool, like quantum 1%, you kind of have to listen a little bit deeper into like some of the subtler levels of research and consciousness that's out there. But really, really cool.
And what you were saying about, the words, saying the words to the rice and to the plants, makes me think of like, what are the words we say to ourselves? And how are we speaking to ourselves? And how are we creating conditions in our physical body as with the root cause of how we think and feel? And that's like precisely where those awesome, gift of Mother Nature flower essences come in, is to try to shift some of those patterns that we have to be so hard on ourselves. We do that.
Right.
We're so hard on ourselves.
Yeah. It sort of reminds me of affirmations, but affirmations for most of my patients by themselves don't seem to work that great. So to me, it's sort of like an enhanced affirmation or a way to clear some of the energetic and the subconscious body while doing affirmations, which is much more effective for me. And you're also doing it multiple times a day with flower essences too. It's like making the commitment to it.
Yeah, you're taking care of yourself. And then the cool thing is you see results that so you know how you're saying like the woman was treated with flower essences and her cat calmed down. And we've seen that when just one person in the family unit works with flower essences, their whole family experiences changes. And there was a study in Boston, actually a 10-year study, where they looked at if your friend's friend's friend becomes wildly happy, it has more of a beneficial effect on you than if someone put $5,000 cash in your pocket. Conversely, if you become wildly happy, it has more of a beneficial effect on your friend's friend's friend. This is somebody you don't even know than if someone put $5,000 cash in their pocket. So it's like we're all so intrinsically linked, even to folks we don't know, that like not to put the pressure on, because all of a sudden it's like, oh my God, like my mental state is affecting so many people, but also kind of inspiring. It's like,
Yes.
as a human being, we're like, wow, like so powerful beyond belief that if we do a good thing or we feel a good thing, it ripples out.
Totally. It's like you really are the sum of the 5 people you spend the most time with in so many ways. And you can change them too, which is great, just by being a better version of yourself. And one of the coolest research studies of the last 5 years, I think, was one showing that people who take antibiotics, the gut flora of the other people in their home, the diversity gets reduced as well. So like in a similar way, like plants affecting humans, humans affecting humans, we know women's cycles, menstrual cycles will sync up with each other, but like our gut flora and our skin flora are linked up. People know when they date a new partner that they start to oftentimes smell like their partner, or their tastes and preferences change. It's really all the same thing. And I feel like one of the biggest wake ups people have in spiritual awakenings, or a sacred awareness, let's say, that people get, is that we're all interlinked. And I think the coolest thing about the flower essence is it's going beyond human interlink, and basically between nature, human, universe, like all of the living things, alive and non-alive, are much more interlinked than we've really wanted to admit.
Yeah, I remember when my teacher said once, he said, when you feel small, he was talking to me about the spiritual path. He said, when you feel like, so low, you feel like a piece of dirt, like a speck of dust, like you're nothing but this like tiny little piece of dirt, you become the whole world. And I was like, wow, that is really wild, because when you, like, let's say you go out into the mountains or the ocean, or you go to some nature place and you feel that sense of bigness, like that majestic, and you suddenly feel really small, like a bear could eat me, or, like just the majesticness of the nature is like, wow. It's like a reflection of you. You become it. It's like you become that expansiveness and you feel that inseparability, that you also have that quality.
Yeah. So I think what's interesting too is when people there are some studies on flower essences as far as like when I've tried to convince other doctors or engineers or like the really logical minded people about it. And the funniest part to me is that, it's kind of comical that you would study a flower essence versus a placebo, because people don't even know what a placebo is when they're talking about this. Because a placebo, I write about it in the book I wrote, but it's basically like intention, expectation, and awareness. And that's what a flower essence is basically like a whole lot of intention and awareness built into a bottle or a tincture of some sort. So it's like people think that like placebo is bad or but like placebo is one of the most profoundly healing tools we have on the planet. So it's like, why not give people not just like a blank placebo, but give them like the best possible placebo they could possibly get in the tastiest form. And it's just weird that people are shamed into like, oh, it's no better than placebo. I was like, it's a placebo. That's amazing. Like, I want more placebo. Like, that's great. It's like people are just backwards. Like, I don't know. I just have to correct people, which is hard to do sometimes because they're like, oh, I saw this study that like placebo versus this. I'm like, you have no clue what you're talking about, because like if you were an actual healer, you would want to give people the biggest possible placebo, because that means that they're going to be much more likely to actually get better.
100%.
Yeah.
I'm sure your patients come to see you and they feel your desire for them to get well. It goes into whatever you recommend to them, and then they ingest it, and it's like imbued with all of that powerful motivational source. So I agree. And then also you can tell those people, like, how does it work with babies? How does it work with pets? How does it work with plants? Like,
right.
I think that we're afraid as a culture, we're afraid to be stupid. I think that's where that comes from. It's like, oh, it's just a placebo and I've been fooled. Like, I don't want to look like a fool.
Yeah.
And
that's so true.
But also, like, babies respond. Oh my God, pets respond so quickly. So it goes beyond placebo, even.
Yeah. Yeah, I saw you have a blend specifically for pets, but can you also give any of the flower essences to pets? Yeah.
Yeah, I usually tell people just give your pet whatever you're taking. Because they probably feel what you're feeling, so just give them what you're taking.
Totally. What's funny is like my fiance and I both had our own dogs. Now we have like the two dogs together. And whenever I try not to treat her very often, just to keep like boundaries and energetic boundaries. But like every once in a while, I'll do some acupuncture on her just for like general stress support. I don't try to like treat anything. I'm just like, let's see what it does. And every time her dog will lay beneath her and like lick his paws, which is his kind of like anxiety release. And then after a few minutes, he just like passes out for like an hour. It's like the most adorable thing, but he feels whatever she's going through. And when she's having an anxious day, he'll like lick his paws. When she's stressed, he'll lick his paws. When she's like in a really good place, he like won't lick his paws for months. So it's pretty remarkable that they really do feel what we're going through. I think you just have to be mindful enough to see it.
Yeah, they're good mirrors. Just like plants, they're really good mirrors.
Yeah. I wonder if they know how toxic our world is either. Like if they're watching people brush their teeth with toothpaste, Colgate, and they're like, there's fluoride in there. Like, don't do that. That's hurting your teeth. It's hurting my teeth. I don't want to have to go to the vet to get my teeth cleaned. Like, or they're like watching people shower in chlorine. They're like, oh my God, that water's not good. Or like they give their dog tap water. They're like, can you please filter it? Like, wonder what's going on in their head if they're as aware as we are, or they have less awareness than us. Be interesting to find out. We need a pet psychic to talk to. But
I'm sure
they definitely. I'm sure. Yeah, it's interesting. But yeah, that plant study. You said was it Clyde Baxler?
Cleve
Baxler. That's so cool. Pretty wild. Maybe that's why those devices aren't around anymore. Pretty neat. So could you talk a little bit more? I know on your website, I think is it lotuswei.com, right?
Mm-hmm.
LOTUSWEI. Yeah. There's a flower quiz on there. which is a genius, like you said, way to figure out what's wrong. And I've used it with a few patients already with some of the cards for practitioners that you can order. And it does work surprisingly well. It's pretty cool. I'm still amazed that we can, like we talk about it on here already, like that someone could be attracted to the flower that is good for them. Amazes me, like all the time. Muscle testing amazes me. Flower essences amaze me when they work. Like just what we're doing. Whenever people get better, I'm always like somewhat shocked. It's like, wow, this stuff works. This is so cool. But even herbs and things like that are fascinating. Just like the innate intelligence and healing capacity of the body is wild. So I think like in that innate intelligence, the flower quiz is really useful to harness that. But can you talk a little bit more about what it is, or how is it like a really long quiz, or what that's about?
There's two different ones. There's one that's like if you're a beginner and it's like 3 seconds or less. I mean, it's so fast. You just pick three things and you get three recommendations. And there's a longer one, which I like even better. I have been taking it like every week. I'm like so fascinated by it. And I have all the flower essences at my disposal, but I'm like, well, what do I need now? And I just find it so curious. You choose from, it's like 16 different slides, and you're basically like going into this garden, and it's quick. It's like even the long one is like a minute, maybe 60 seconds to just like touch flower, touch flower, touch flower. I like this one, I like this one, I like this one. And then you get three recommendations at the end. It's always spot on, spot on, spot on. And then if you take those remedies and you work with them like a lot, dang, it's impressive at how much better you feel. Yeah. And I think when you're talking, it's like I'm thinking we don't even know what these flower essences can do. I've been working with them for 20 some years, and like you said, I'm like never tired of it. I'm always amazed. Every month I try something new and I'm like, wow. It's like muscle testing. It's like a miracle. It's like a love affair that never gets old. And you learn things like we've had multiple practitioners on different continents tell us, hey, your Truth Teller blend, which is like a compilation of flower essences for speech. Like that they both had clients whose children were nonverbal autistic kids within 1 month of using that remedy can now speak. And I'm like, I don't even know how to explain that, or like we've had a lot of cases recently of elders whose mental capacity is kind of going, or they're not able to like quite get the words together in a sentence, in terms of like coordination or whatever the speech part of the brain is. And they just like choo, choo, choo with a little sacred awareness, and it flows like water, And so, I mean, that's like, we're at a level where I don't even know how to explain this stuff anymore. Like, I don't know how it's working. I just know that it's working.
Great. That's so cool, though. I mean, it's great that someone can do like a really quick 30-second quiz and basically come up with something that's going to help them. It reminds me of like some people have issue with the I Ching or with other kind of like guides that are meant to sort of help you self-reflect or bring awareness, or some people have beef with like astrology or whatever. But like what's nice is that this is basically Mother Nature, the universe, God, whatever you believe in. It's like that creation of plants that nature has, and you're just using nature's healing essence for yourself. Like there's not really anything that is going to upset people in a spiritual plane, really, in my sense, unless there's occasionally like a pastor who's like, ooh, any type of holistic healing, stay away. Like you can only use pharmaceutical drugs to poison yourself and heal, but that's rare. So I just think it's really cool that nature itself is the inspiration. So from like a philosophical level and a practical level, there's not really any downsides to using flower essences, unless you had like your arm cut off and you think that the flower essence is going to like regrow an arm. It might prevent you from going to the emergency room, but like for the most part, I think it's really powerful. And I know you have some like before and after stories and pictures of people, and I've seen that too. And even within like a dose or two, people's stress can melt away. Their eyes can twinkle a little bit more, which is fascinating. But that's one of the biggest things I see, is that people's the heaviness in their eyes go away. And I think a lot of us are so disconnected from people. We're afraid to connect. And when you look into someone's eyes without really looking away much, you don't want to like do it in a creepy way or a sociopathic kind of way. But when you really like stare in someone's eyes, you can see their true essence, and you can feel like if they're in pain, if they're happy, if they're sad, where they're at. Are they tired? Are they energized? Are they recharged? Are they excited about life? And one of the biggest things I've seen is with flower essence is when you stare into somebody's eyes for even like 10 seconds, you can kind of feel them, especially for empaths and people like that. Like you can feel their state. You can say like, oh, they're a little bit run down, they're a little bit tired. And then you can give them a flower essence and instantly feel that shift. Just even calling awareness to it for them is often like, oh my God, how do you know that? Well, like I just looked at you. Like I looked in your eyes and we can tell how you're doing. And people always wonder, like sometimes they think people are always psychic or intuitive. I'm like, sometimes they're just empaths who are just looking at you. Like, you know, you're crossing your arms all the time. They think like maybe you're a little bit protective or you got boundary issues or you're like over guarding yourself and your heart's closed off. Or you're kind of like closing off. You don't want to open up your heart. So there's a lot of ways to tell, but I think you can definitely see changes in people's eyes and their face and their micro expressions, how their resting bitch face goes away a lot of times too, which is wonderful to see. You know?
Oh my God, yeah. And then over time, like the epigenetics of that, they show like the epigenetics of what happens when you take drugs. And then it goes the other way which is like, if you release the stress in that moment, and then if you continue to do that, it's like this crazy anti-aging effect, that we're not holding all that stuff in. Most people who take flower essences regularly look younger, actually, than their age.
Yep. Yeah, like you, when you said you've been doing it for 20 years, I'm like, oh, so you've been doing it since you were like 5 years old, 10 years old? How's that going? It's good, but it's like, even with the high def camera, it's reverse aging well. But like the question is, I guess like, how long does that last for? And I sort of say like it lasts until it's re-injured. Like your nervous system should heal and stay healed. Like if you were to take something for things like in general, if it's healed to the root, that's the question. Like if it's healed to the root, if you get to the root cause, then it should stay that way for a while. But do you find that every once in a while, like new triggers come up, people go back to the same remedies? Or do you feel like if they take a bottle or a period of time that kind of like goes on? Probably depends on their external circumstances, who's around them too, I guess. Like if they're in a toxic marriage, they might need the truth teller one all the time. But what's your take on that concept or question of like going back to the same remedies or not?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like you probably see it a lot in your practice too, of like, even just like a physical symptom arises and you're like, oh, how long have you had knee pain? Your thinking process might be different if the person said, well, I just got injured and it's hurt for a week, from like, I've had chronic knee pain for the last 30 years, so the time it
Varies.
takes to heal something might be, if I'm looking at like, I want to heal abandonment issues because my dad left when I was 1. That might take more than a bottle, It
Right.
might be, it's like it'll take a
What if you
couple
drink
years
it all at
probably.
once?
But then there are other things that I find that you can dislodge it and like kick it out immediately and you don't need to go back to it.
Yeah.
And then there's like the weirder ones, Brad, are like the collective ones. So like I find there were like a bunch of remedies that we released in 2020 and 2021 and in the last few years, and there's sort of like this wave of kind of collective stuff. And this year we're working on like subconscious fears, almost like that we don't even know are there. And we have this one remedy called awaken perception. And I remember the first day I took it, it was like I had 24 hours of a UTI. And I was like, wait a minute. I haven't had one of these since I was like in my early 20s. Like, what is this? But it was somehow my body's intelligent way of working with these flower essences to take whatever fears were stuck in my, kidneys or bladder and just like out. Take a little cranberry juice. And that was that. I mean,
Wow.
like that's cool if as many people as we know can just like clear out a old clunky piece of, weird subconscious fear in 24 hours, like, take it. Let's do it.
For sure. Yeah. And for people who don't know yet, like the Chinese medicine Ayurvedic correlation between the kidney and bladder is fear. So that's another reason why that probably happened. That's so wild. Um, hmm.
Yeah, I find that, when I was looking at the flowers that wanted to come out this year, and they're like basically all around fear, I was like, come on. I was like, didn't we already do this a few years ago? And then I looked at the
Yeah.
stuff coming out, and I was like, oh no, no, yeah, no, we didn't work on fear of famine, and we didn't work on fear of persecution, maybe totally, and we didn't, it's like, oh, there's all these like
Yeah.
crazy things that we don't
Yeah.
necessarily face in everyday life that if we could get them out of our system individually or collectively, we would be so powerful. Like, think of all the best people,
Sure.
like taking charge on a whole other level and like leading the ship.
Yeah.
It's like super exciting.
Yeah. How do you think that manifests like the opposite of fear? If you're like taking charge in some way, not out of fear, but what do you think that would look like when someone starts to move away from like action from fear?
It's love. Love is the opposite of fear.
Yep.
But it's like it can manifest in so many forms, right? It's not necessarily like, let me caress your face, love. It's like power. It's like I'm unafraid of myself. I can sit with intense emotions. I can sit with your intense emotions. I can embrace you in your full capacity as a human being. Wild, crazy, angry, fierce,
Mm.
like all facets of ourself we can be present with and then harness that energy to become powerful. That's love.
Mm. Yeah. Reminds me of Dr. Ben Tapper during the pandemic. He said, when your convictions become greater than your complacency, speaking out is easy. And what I realized just now is that the convictions come from a place of love, and the complacency is a cover up for fear. And so I think if you're able to release the fear, then you can be more in your authentic self, your conviction, and your true core, which I believe in all of us is pure love,
That
which
is
is,
something we saw in the last 3 years that shocked me actually was that in 2020 and 2021, the people in our community, they were just like so rooted in their truth, whatever that truth was for them, like unfazed by the external world. And Brad, it's like I didn't actually realize what my flower essence teacher was telling me when he was talking about the 3%. It's like it sounded good, and then and then I'd see that my clients' whole families would change, and then I kind of started to understand, oh, it ripples out into people who aren't taking them. Okay, cool. And then you read about the studies, but to see that in the last 3 years was much more like, oh, that's what he was talking about. Like to be so rooted in your sense of truth that even though all the external forces are saying one thing, you know what's right for you or what's real for you. That's some kind of courage that's immovable, unshakable.
so were you finding certain flowers would help people question their beliefs, or like, if they're super rigid in their truth, to be more open-minded?
It would help them unplug from collective hysteria or like wavelengths from news or stories or other people's emotional drama around XYZ
Yeah.
and like locate their sense of inner compass or common sense or something inside of them that was just their own inner compass.
Yeah, some people hear them, they're like, we should just put these flower essences in the tap water. But then it would be the same thing. We'd just be healing people without consent, which is not great either, I guess. So you deserve to stay sick and unwell and calcified. But
Oh my
keep
god.
your pineal gland to yourself. I don't know. But it could be cool to start giving out some healing water in some place. There's got to be, it'd be a great experiment to like take a town that's not like Sedona or something, take Phoenix or something, and just like sections of the population put flower essences in the tap water and see what happens. It'd be a great experiment. I don't know if it would be
I
ethical
mean,
or
you could even.
consensual, but
I mean, it's just like drinking flowers, right? You can even do it in like a company or a corporation or an organization. You've got half that aren't, just drinking the regular coffee and water, and then the other half, and they could even offer consent. Like, let's see what happens. I don't know. Let's see what
right.
happens. There's
Yep.
some flower essences that came out last year that like radically changed the way we do business, and that was another like big surprise to me. Like I
Which
found that
ones?
there's one blend we have called Divine Truth, and it's oh man, it's like being okay with conflict. So, typically before our meetings would be like a lot of nice and yeah, that's a great idea, Brad. And like, what if we, and then it's like we're all on Divine Truth, and it's like, why are we doing it that way? I don't understand. This is really uncomfortable. Like all this conflict came in, but then we felt much more connected and engaged and alive and dynamic, and shit was moving like really fast, and really efficient, and we were real. It wasn't taking forever because we're all like so nice and PC, it's
Yeah.
like, but it also is like rooting you into your sense of purpose and conviction, and there's just something about that feels good.
Yeah. Nice. I guess I got too many questions. How about, why do some of the flower essences have silver, bioactive silver, or silver hydrosol, and some have gold? What's that about?
Mm, it's a really good question. Part of it has to do with the timing of when they came out. So
Mm.
the ones that have silver came out in 20 and 21, and it was a time when we really wanted to have strong immune systems. We still do, and those remedies aren't going anywhere. The ones that have gold are more responding to emotional disturbances or people having trouble sleeping, wanting more of a sense of balance, less, more calm, less kind of restlessness. And there was a period, I think, of emotional adjustment that needed to happen after the world shut down. And then now we are working with copper hydrosol, which is sort of a
Mm.
whole other interesting, and it's like a homeopathic level of metallics that can promote health in the body and help make our systems more conductive for flower essences.
Got it. Really cool. I love the way that they're in too. Like they're in the mist bottles. They're in some of the like tinctures and the anointing oils. Could you sort of give a brief overview of like what those are for? Because some people are like, "What do I get?" I'm like, "Get them all, though. Get one you're called to," or like, how do you um, know which one to use?
Yeah, I mean, like if you're going at it from a more physical aspect, like for example, we have one called Sacred Body, and it's in the mist. I mean, the mist has night blooming jasmine oil in it, so it's divine smelling, but it's in a whole base of colloidal silver. So you can like spray it in your nose, you can spray it in your mouth, you can spray it on your kids' faces if they're getting like runny noses and colds. You can spray it on your dogs. Um, and it has that really nice like antibacterial effect. I shouldn't even say antibacterial. I have one friend that's like, bacteria is great, don't call it anti.
Right.
But colloidal silver has those like magic qualities to it.
Yeah, it's like a
And then
bacterial
any
balancer or something.
right. Anything in the Sacred series has colloidal silver base in the mist and the elixir. Anything that
Nice.
has a divine in its name has gold in it. And you're either ingesting it through the elixir form, as you put it through your, coffee, water, tea, or if you mist it on your face, you're actually breathing it into your lungs as well. Yeah.
So, what about the difference between like taking an elixir or a mist or an oil, um, energetically? Like, how are those different?
Yeah, I mean, when I first started, I always thought that, like, oh, surely taking it internally is going to be more effective. And what we found was actually the opposite. We used to set up at farmers markets in the early days, and like we'd watch hundreds of people on a Saturday walk through, pick a flower, have an experience. And I mean, I guess it makes sense. You're working with your body's energy. So really, you just got to get it in or on, and it's going to be the same result. So then it really comes down to like, what do you enjoy more? Like, how do you enjoy taking care of yourself more? Like, do you like putting drops in your mouth or your coffee or your beverages? Like, or are you going to a lunch date with somebody and you can spike it with joy juice and then everybody's like laughing like crazy? Or is it more this like, wow, yummy, sensuous experience from the essential oils when you miss yourself? I mean, I do find actually we have, I think she's a friend of yours, Elizabeth Anderson. She is our applied kinesiology chiropractor here.
Mhm.
And she finds that, she says that if it's a mist, it's like clearing your aura really quickly.
Mm.
Whereas if it's like an anointing oil, you can put it on like specific points. Like we've got an acupuncturist here, Alan. He'll put it on your points before he puts the needles in. Or like a serum.
Cool.
Maybe you hurt your back and you want to just like rub it all over your lower back. So, I mean,
Yeah.
a lot of different ways to use it. It really doesn't matter. It's all going to be just as effective. It's more like what kind of experience do you want to have? I'm going to let this
Got it.
go out or she.
Yeah. Get
Yeah.
it. So cool. Yeah. For people who don't know, well, keys away. There's elixirs, which are like oral. The aura mists are more of like the sprays, facial mists, aura mists. There's anointing oils, which are more like drops for the body. There's bath salts. They even have different tea and chocolate. The chocolate I've found to be absolutely delicious. Um, Pretty
The
wild.
chocolate's so good.
So, when it is the chocolate newer in the last couple years?
The chocolate?
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. We grew our companies up side by side. She's been around since like 2008, 9, 10. But
Oh wow.
I mean, I think she's just like reached more people in the last few years.
It's
But it's good.
Lisa.
Yeah, it's good. Yeah, Lisa. She spent 10 years living in Asia, studying with some of the greatest meditation masters. She even did a solitary retreat in a cave in India. And at some point, she came back to the US reluctantly. Didn't think she was going to stay. Thought she'd go back in a few months. Ended up staying. And then that was in 99. Same kind of era as me. It was like she could see that people needed meditation, but that people had resistance to it. And so her primary way of working with the chocolate was to help people practice meditation without knowing it. Because she'd say, like, okay, put a piece of chocolate in your mouth, let your body heat melt it. Don't go anywhere else but where you are with the chocolate. Like, just focus on the chocolate. And
Yeah.
oftentimes people would do a better meditation with the chocolate than like trying to follow their breath.
Totally. Yeah. One of the recent podcasts I did, we did a chocolate meditation on the podcast, which probably came from her, like years ago then. And then one of the local docs and her husband, who's a reverend, picked it up. And it was really delightful. And I haven't done it with the Way of Chocolate, but I'm assuming it would be even more impactful because it has the flower essences built into this delicious chocolate. And it seems to sell
Yeah.
out a lot too. So when it's in
Yeah.
stock, I'm like,
Yeah.
make sure I get a bunch. Which is probably why it sells out then. But so cool.
Yeah, I remember when I was first like saying, you gotta put flower essences in your chocolate because we were only doing herbs and she was only doing herbs and spices for a while. And she was like, that'll never work. What are you talking about? It's like solid, it's liquid. Like, how's that gonna work? That's never gonna work. And then she was like, oh my gosh, I'm an idiot. Like, she remembered that in chocolate making, there's 4 different forms of crystals, and only one of them creates that like beautiful chocolate. Like when it melts and it comes back,
Hmm.
it's funky. So when the crystalline shape, when it takes place in the chocolate, it takes the shape informed by the flower essences. It's like
That's
water.
really cool. Yeah, it's like Veda Austin's work or Masuro Emoto and all the yeah, that's a whole rabbit hole too of like the beautifulness and subtleties of the world. But pretty remarkable. I mean, the first time I had the Way of chocolate too, I was really like confused because I took a bite and I was like, what is this? This feels like more than chocolate. Because I'm sensitive, I guess. I've taken a flower essence. I'm like, this feels better than normal chocolate. Is it like more sugar? Is there some type of like MSG in here? I was like, what is this? And I was like, oh, it's flower essences. That's why. Because it just had like a higher frequency to it than you're used to. It's kind of like when you go to like pick a fruit fresh from the tree when it's like perfectly ripe and eat it versus actually, it's like the difference between like a fake Christmas tree and cutting down your own Christmas tree and bringing it into your house. It's like the energy is just drastically different, even though it still looks like a tree, acts like a tree. Fake flowers versus real flowers make a big difference. And I had one of my old office staff, we had fake flowers from the Belgian doctor. And first thing she's like, she did some, what's it called? Some of that like energy spatial design in Chinese medicine.
Feng Shui.
Feng Shui. Yeah, she had done some Feng Shui class and she's like, we have to get the fake plants out of here. Like, those are dead plants. You can't have dead patients. Like, that's just a bad idea. I mean, there was a lot of healing that happened in that office despite the fake plants, but it definitely felt nicer to have real plants. Then we just had to learn how to keep real plants alive, which I think subsequently, when you learn how to take care of plants, I think it does help you take care of yourself and take care of patients better. But yeah, really profound with the chocolate. It's like a long segue back to like, people really feel the chocolate and are kind of attracted to it, which is nice.
Well, it's also nice to have a treat that you can eat guilt-free. It's like you could eat a whole bar of that every day and never get fat. Like, is that a good life or is that a good life? You know?
That's a really good life. If you're going to like go for some kind of substance to be addicted to, it's much better to be flower essences and chocolate than cocaine or whatever else there is these days, opiates and all the other vape pens and things that are out there. I was like, maybe you could make a vape pen that has flower essences to get people to stop vaping. It'd be fascinating. Reminds me of like there's different herbal things like smokes and things like that. But what's funny is I've tried to get people away from smoking cigarettes, and if I give them I'll like gift them herbal cigarettes of like herbs to smoke that are non-tobacco or have no addicting qualities, and they usually don't even smoke a full one. They're like, I'm done. Like, it's interesting. It sort of like gets them away from cigarettes a lot faster because they're like, oh, I don't like smoking at all. I just like the substance. So interesting realization. Or they like the drug or like the effect of that sort of thing. But I guess I wanted to ask too, in general, if someone's feeling a general collective sense of despair, like you said, they're watching the news, they're a little bit down still from the pandemic, they think the world's a terrible place, the economy is not so great, the election's coming up, like, is there something you're working on now or any of those general divine remedies or sacred remedies that you would recommend for that type of person?
If it's despair, I recommend Sacred Heart. Now more than ever. I've never seen this happen before this year. That oftentimes we'll just like lightly miss somebody with Sacred Heart and they just burst into tears. And they're like, sorry, I don't know what this is. Oh, I gotta go to the bathroom. Oh, like, and we just say like, this happens all the time. No big deal. And we just hold space for it. But I think it's because we've got so much pent up stuff, you know, and it's like, we're ready to dump it. So Sacred Heart, if it's like despair or like, where do I belong, or grief or just heaviness in your heart, if you are over that and you're like, I want to put the pedal to the metal and I want to like dig in and strengthen for the future, then it would be something more like awakened perception or divine timing, like something a little more like expansive in leadership. But if it's more like, oh man, the world's going to hell in a handbasket, I would probably recommend Sacred Heart.
Got it. Yeah, I still see a lot of people in that hell in a handbasket. Kind of, they're in that basket. They're that category. But it's interesting. The one that has come up the most for my patients is actually the white columbine, which is fascinating.
Yes. Yeah, that's the mental tug of war. Should I do this?
Mm.
Should I not do this? Is this right? Is this wrong? Do I go here? Go there? Oh, 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 oh. And can't actually just like relax and be your own best friend. Yeah,
Got it.
that's like a game changer. Then when you experience it, it's like, oh, monkey's off my back. Such a relief.
Mm.
And when you say
Interesting.
that, it's coming up for your patients. Are you muscle testing?
Either muscle testing or both of them, like visually, I think looking at it and being like, oh, that's really interesting. Um, yeah, wild. I'm looking at the website now as we're talking. Actually, it says like, don't have to bear the weight of the world alone, as there is an army of support behind you within you, like to give you that army of support, dissolves sadness, grief, loneliness, anguish, confusion, being alone. That's something I think can help a lot, and that's in the blend you were just talking about too, the Sacred
Sacred.
Heart.
Yeah. It's really
Pretty
something.
wild.
It's really
Mm-hmm.
awesome. I've actually used it probably nonstop for the last year. It's really stabilizing.
Nice. So how many remedies do you have in your rotation on average? Is it like you got like 50 different ones going all the time, or is it like you do a few at a time?
I mean, I think at this point we have some in the kitchen and the bedroom and the office, and there's like a little. You just kind of grab what you need in the moment, but it's weird, Brad. Like I find that it's changing so rapidly. Like 20 years ago, I'd give people one bottle and I'd say, take it 3 to 5 times a day, and that was enough. Now I find even just in the last couple of years, I'm taking 4 or 5 different remedies and putting them in every glass of water.
Hmm.
And misting them on and putting them on an oil. And granted, I have access, so I can use them up. But I just find that things are changing. Whether is it 4G, is it the EMFs, is it our lifestyles, is it the food, is it? I'm not really sure what it is. I just find that I'm more comfortable the more that I use.
Yeah.
Whereas it wasn't that way before. I didn't need it that much, you know?
Yep. Yeah, I feel like there's a collective either slight bog or slight heaviness that it takes a little bit more of the tools in your tool belt to kind of push through it. Like, can't just be like, oh, I got 9 hours of sleep. My whole day is going to be amazing. You're like, okay, I need like 9 hours sleep and maybe some walks, maybe some time outside, maybe some flower essences, turn off the news. Like, you just have to do a few more things these days to really get the same
And
bang for your buck.
yeah, and I keep thinking too, like it could be one of two. It could be either that life is getting kind of more challenging, or like that the external forces are more destabilizing, or it could also be that as a species or as humanity, we're undergoing this like crazy purification acceleration process where we can handle more and we can handle more grit and we are stronger. And so the stuff's got to come up to come out, which is also cool.
It is cool. Yeah, a lot of the esoteric healers I know are saying that sort of thing. Like, there's a lot of changes happening on a cosmological level, like the different Earth frequencies and what they call them, like the solar flares and things like that, are all higher than they've been in a long time. There's just a lot more like change going on. So it's probably bringing up a lot more inside of us. I mean, if we're connected to the earth and we are stardust, and if the plants can feel us, we can certainly feel the earth. The earth can feel us. So um, we're probably all getting a little bit of that as well.
One piece of good news I've heard about this year in particular is that the wood dragon year is super auspicious. So like if there's something that you want, you focus on it, like this is the year you can accomplish it. And if you work really hard, like especially the first 3 months of they call it in Chinese astrology, like the dragon head,
Mm-hmm.
um, that like nothing can stop you, whether it's like an internal habitual pattern or something in the external world. It's a really special year, which is it's kind of nice when you get a leg up like
That
that.
is nice. Yeah. Maybe you don't have to take the Venus flytrap. It'll just come to you, but you also have to go grab it too, like a little both. Don't burn yourself out, but now's the year, guys. Get on it. It could be great. Um, nice. I was going to ask what your like favorite remedies are lately? Or do you have like one that's been particularly inspiring or something you've seen really help a lot of people lately? It's like asking a cook their favorite ingredient. It's kind of a tough question.
I know. What's your favorite child? I mean, we have a subscription program that every month we release a new flower, and it's a single flower, so it's pretty targeted. And that always fascinates me because we'll do like a quick Zoom every month, and people have been taking it, get on and describe what's happening in their lives. And we just looked at one flower called chicory. And chicory flower is actually in like a blend that we have, the awaken perception, and it's all about like seeing what you haven't been seeing, or like seeing the truth, or like dissolving habitual patterns of numbness or distraction, or like, oh, I don't really want to see that. Just numb out. And we do that in so many ways culturally. But then we also do these things where we like believe in things that aren't true to play small, right? And, like victim mentality, or like we hold ourselves back with something that's not true. So that's been really interesting to see what happens when we just like pull off a whole layer of untruths and like have more strength to look at what's real. And it's like that blind spot phenomenon, you know? And man, that is fascinating to watch people. Like we just had a call on Friday, and some of the people were like, realized I'm in a relationship that's not working for the last 7 years, and it's gotta go. Whoa, what?
Yeah.
Or I realized that during the day I was being a healing practitioner, and at night I was doing everything I could to numb out. That's got to stop. And then they like switched that dynamic. I mean, it's like, to me, the most ballsy form of honesty, that you can like be that honest with yourself and other people. It's like pretty amazing. One other flower that's in that same blend is an orchid from Costa Rica called the rain orchid. That one I watched pretty single-handedly pull out traumatic, like wartime PTSD trauma stuff from like a special forces ex-military guy. He'd been stabbed, he'd been shot, he'd been blown up. He was like hiding under a burning car but couldn't move because they were going to kill him. Like just stuff that just seems like movies to us. And that particular flower essence, along with boundless wisdom, it's really good for PTSD.
Mhm.
Just like in one hour session, pulled all that stuff out of his fascia.
Wow.
So those are like some of the kind of interesting things I'm seeing, along with like kids with PANS and PANDA and autism, folks with dementia. Those are kind of the most impressive to me because I think I don't, they're mysterious. Like I don't understand them yet. It's easier for me to understand how it can help people sleep better or laugh more, feel more love, or I get that. But then when I see these huge changes, I'm more amazed.
Yeah. The whole pandas has been a really interesting thing, both on like a physical plane, a biochemical immune system plane, and on a energetic plane. You see a lot of shifts. But are you seeing that remedy help with pandas a little bit too? I guess for people who don't know, pandas is basically an immune thing where like you get an infection like strep, and then it goes to the brain, and it can impact a kid's mental health profoundly with your like anxiety or OCD or depression, or just like major changes in behavior or personality shifts that can come and go with immune system changes.
Also is pretty highly correlated, at least with the docs I'm talking to, are like with this sort of, since we were kids, there's so many more vaccines now that they're giving children.
Yep.
And yeah, I mean, it's kind of wild. Like I had never heard of it either until the last month. And then I'm working with these doctors in Austin, and I was like, what is this thing actually? Like, what is PANS Panda? And she said it's when your immune system starts to attack your brain, and a child can be completely normal, and then overnight, they have what they're calling like a regression, where they have motor impairments, coordination disturbances, a lot of emotional stuff, OCD, eye contact changes, I actually have one friend who says every now and then it happens to my son. He's like normal, 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 and then all of a sudden for a couple of weeks it's like he's 4 years old again. So it's extremely interesting, and what I find fascinating is that the one doctor I talked to last week, she said all of our previous protocols for autism are not working, and these kiddos are not responding to supplements and vitamins and omega-3s and minerals like they used to. The only thing that is working right now is energy medicine. It's like homeopathy, flower essences. That's it. Like energy medicine. That's like really the only thing that's moving the dial for these kiddos.
That's wild. I've found a
And then
similar sort of thing with those kids too. They're much more sensitive. They're coming with like subtle energy, emotional issues more than like back in the day. It was like, oh, they're just inflamed and their guts off. It's like their immune system, they're not super inflamed beyond like an existential subtle way, which is wild.
And tell me more.
I just see like doing craniosacral, doing some somatic emotional release with that, doing some NET or flower essences or really subtle things with them is making a much bigger shift. And some of the drugs that they were taking, like one of them was having a lot of seizures, had a really energetically sensitive kid who was having like seizures 20 times a day. And they put him on high doses of CBD, and then their platelets dropped down to like almost nothing. They were getting like really like almost like dangerous level of low platelets. And so we had to take them off the CBD, and their platelets came back. They started doing better. But the issue is more of like a relational issue from like a emotional shock or trauma. And so I'm seeing a lot more stress or subtle energy imbalances in the kids where they're much more energetically sensitive or aware than most. Some people would call that like rainbow kids or indigo children or whatever, but I'm just seeing like a lot more either like evolved souls or more sensitive souls in children, where the issues are their sensitivity to their parents or their siblings who are struggling.
And do you find that's also similar with adults, that they're coming in with more emotional stuff, or also physical like before?
Both. But there's something about like the younger generation, they're either less healthy because of all the toxins that their moms had when they were in the womb, because we know there's more toxins in the womb. Either the shots that they're getting, the water and the food that they're eating and drinking is just not as great as it was for their grandparents. So I think it could be a cumulative load of irritation to their nervous systems, where they're just either more unwell, so they're more sensitive, or some people think they're like a higher consciousness or a higher frequency or the 3D, 4D, 5D type shift. I'm not entirely sure, but I am seeing a shift for sure. I think I still see like structural, chemical, emotional aspects working for older folks. I do think the body is innately intelligent and will accept any sort of healing modality that it has open to it. But I think when given a choice, a lot of the younger generation is they almost have to be more aware, have to be healthier in order to get over things. And I didn't used to see that quite as much.
Fascinating how it's changing, isn't it?
Yeah. Like what people respond to is definitely shifting.
And it almost seems like the changes are happening more and more rapidly, even just in the last 5 years.
Yeah. I also don't know what level of like, if we're all resonating together, we're all sort of like delicate houseplants with emotions. It's one of my favorite quotes. Like you just need water and food and sunlight. Don't forget, like you need water, food, sunlight. If we're all resonating with each other in some way, then I think the pandemic was a major trauma that we're going to take some time to heal the collective for sure. But 3%, that's what we need. We just need 3% to start taking some flower essences, getting some healing, manifesting some of the opposites of fear into love, and things will definitely start shifting.
100%. I've seen it. I believe it.
Yeah. So I guess we can kind of like get to the tail end of the podcast. I wanted to ask, as far one more like general question before closing out, which is sort of like, what's the process of actually collecting flower essences and making them? Like, how do you actually take a flower into an oil or a spray? What does that look like?
Yeah, I mean, so flower essences and essential oils work really well together. And essential oils work really well in any variety of mediums, including oil. Um, and then obviously the flower essences have an easy time going into water-based solutions, like the ones you're taking internally or misting around you. So the combination of both is what helps make it kind of easily accessible from a lot of different base formulas, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. But how do you actually get an essential oil or a flower essence or the like tinctures? Like,
Like,
do you just, or gems even, like, do you just like squish it and put it into water? Or how do
I see
you,
what you mean.
yeah,
I see what you're asking. Okay.
yeah,
Um, we just squeeze those gems. Yeah. No.
yeah.
I guess they do that with orange oil, right? They do. You can get an essential oil by squeezing it. So a flower essence, yeah, it's called a solar infusion process. You can also use the moon, but it must be flowers that are growing in the earth, and they're right at their full bloom point. Collected generally at full moon, new moon, but doesn't have to be when the plant has most of its life force. And that sounds like a woo woo thing, but it's really, farmers know that more flowers come out during full moon, and all the water gets pulled up to plant, like the tides. Um, so it's a little more logical than you think, but it also is kind of magical and mysterious. You're basically pulling the life force of the flower or plant out using the light from the sun. The catalyst drives it into water. Water's the recording device. Alcohol is what preserves it. So essentially, you end up with this like supercharged water that has information in it from this one botanical source. And then essential oils are very different. Essential oils are distillation process. You've got the highly scented oils being pulled out with hot and cold temperatures that are condensing and pulling out that yummy aromatic oil.
Got it.
Very different, but they work really well together.
Got it. Okay. Thanks for answering that. I just like always was curious about that. But I guess if I want to end, I like ending by asking people if you were gonna die tomorrow, which is a very Aquarius thing to ask, but if you were gonna like die tomorrow and you had to leave your staff, your friends, your family, your pets with like one main like lesson or theme or life lesson, what would you want to kind of like leave humanity or your tribe with?
Just like a little light question at the end.
Just a little light question.
Thanks,
Just
Brad.
it's like take your flowers though.
Oh man. I mean, it sounds so cliche. That's the thing. It's like I would say lean in. You know, this whole idea of like you have everything you need. It sounds so cliche, but it's like it's true. Lean in. Like being alone is not separate. Being alone is not lonely. Being alone is not painful. Being alone is expansive. Being alone is powerful. Being alone is connected. We come into this world, we leave alone. We come in alone, we leave alone. And the more we can lean into our like sense of wisdom and power and the parts of ourselves that are so expansive we really can't conceive of it, the more we can lean into that, the more we don't have to look outside for any answers. You know, we don't need the guru, we don't need the astrologer, we don't need the way the winds blow. Like it's we can trust ourselves. We can trust ourselves and our own inner compass. And sure, we can make mistakes and we can screw up, but we learn from those. And I would say right now, it's time. Like, it's time to trust that part of yourself. It's time. Like, the 80s and the 90s and the early 2000s, those are over. Like, we're going into this whole new cycle where it will become imperative to trust that part of yourself and see what you can create with it. Wild expansion.
Love it. Lean into the wild expansion. It's beautiful. Well, thank you so much for joining, Katie. It's been a pleasure getting to know you a little more, chatting, teaching the world about flower essences. And I know it's been decades for you, but it's still exciting for me and all the new people. And even for you still, like all the new flowers and stuff, like there's always new excitement and more to explore. So
Oh my God. I'm such a huge fan of yours, Brad. And I'm like, I could probably speak for all of your listeners that like the world is so grateful for everything that you offer and how you express and how you bring it in. And your like humorous, funny, balanced sense of seeing the world is so refreshing. And, I really appreciate that.
Thanks. Yeah. Thanks for all you're doing. And we're just trying to help people and improve on ourselves a little bit at the same time. Like everybody.
Keep it on.
Keep on keeping on. All right. Thanks, Katie. It's been great.